Take your bags and leave my house!
The snow didn't fall. It hunted, stinging Alina's cheeks as the heavy oak door clicked shut with a finality that echoed through the silent street. Behind that door was the warmth of a designer fireplace and a man she no longer recognized. Her suitcase sat slumped in the slush like a defeated animal. At 7 months pregnant, her center of gravity was gone, leaving her to sway against the biting wind of Christmas Eve. Marcus hadn't even given her a coat. He had only given her an ultimatum he knew she couldn't meet. "Marcus, please." Elena's voice was a thin thread in the gale. She hammered a gloved fist against the wood. "It's freezing. Just let me get my phone. I have nowhere to go." The smart lock glowed a mocking crimson. A second later, the intercom crackled. Marcus's voice was smooth, devoid of the jagged cruelty he displayed moments ago. "I told you, Elena, if you can't be a team player for the firm's image, you aren't part of this family. Go to your mother's. Oh wait, she finally stopped taking your calls, didn't she? You made sure of that," she whispered, her forehead leaning against the freezing door. "Check your email," Marcus said, his tone shifting to a terrifyingly professional calm. "I've filed the separation. Don't make a scene. The neighbors are watching, and you know how much I value my reputation. If you ruin this night for me, I'll make sure the custody hearing is a nightmare you never wake up from." The intercom went dead. Elena stood paralyzed. The street lights of their gated community flickered, casting long skeletal shadows across the pristine white lawns. She looked down at her hands, shaking violently, not just from the cold, but from the realization that every bridge behind her had been systematically burned by the man she loved. She reached for her suitcase handle, her fingers numb. She had exactly $42 in her pocket and a battery-dead phone. The betrayal was a physical weight, heavier than the child kicking restlessly against her ribs. Cruelty is loud, she thought, remembering her father's old warning. But self-respect is quiet. She turned away from the house, her boots crunching in the deep snow. She hadn't reached the end of the driveway when a pair of headlights cut through the gloom. A black SUV, sleek and silent as a predator, slowed to a crawl beside her. The windows were tinted so darkly she could only see her own haggard reflection. The vehicle didn't belong to the neighborhood patrol. It didn't have a lift sign. It simply sat there, idling, the exhaust pluming like dragon's breath in the cold air. The rear window rolled down just an inch. A plume of expensive cigar smoke drifted out, followed by a voice that made Elena's heart stop. It wasn't Marcus. It was someone who had been missing for 5 years. "You're late, Elena," the voice rasped. The clock started 10 minutes ago. Elena froze, the name catching in her throat like a shard of ice. "Julian?" The window lowered further, revealing the sharp, aristocratic profile of Julian Vane. 5 years ago, he was the man Marcus had stepped over to climb the corporate ladder, the man Marcus claimed had been ruined and exiled. But the man sitting in the leather interior of the SUV looked anything but ruined. He looked like the storm itself. "Get in," Julian said. It wasn't a request. It was a lifeline thrown with a heavy dose of irony. Before the frostbite settles the custody battle permanently, Elena glanced back at the glowing windows of her home. Marcus was likely watching from the upstairs study, sipping scotch, savoring his victory. "I can't. If he sees me with you, he already sees you," Julian interrupted, tapping the glass. "And he's already decided who you are. The question is, do you want to be the woman shivering on the curb, or the one who makes him regret he ever opened this door?" Elena reached for the handle. The warmth of the car hit her like a physical embrace, smelling of cedar and old money. As she sank into the seat, the SUV began to move, gliding silently away from the life she had spent 6 years building. "How did you know?" she asked, her voice trembling as she rubbed her pregnant belly. "How did you know he'd do it tonight?" Julian didn't look at her. He was staring at a tablet glowing with complex legal filings. "Marcus is a creature of habit, Elena. He clears his assets before the new fiscal year. You were a liability the moment you stopped being a trophy and started being a mother. I've been tracking his movements for months. You were stalking us. I was waiting for the opening, Julian corrected. He turned the screen toward her. It was a scanned document, a transfer of property. He didn't just kick you out. Alina, he's already emptied the joint accounts and transferred the deed of the house to a holding company in the Caymans. By tomorrow morning, you don't just lose a husband, you lose your legal existence. Elena's breath hitched. The betrayal was deeper than she had imagined. It wasn't just an outburst, it was a calculated execution of her life. Why are you helping me? You hated him. I still do, Julian said softly. But I don't help people for free. I need someone who knows the back doors of his server. Someone he trusts, or rather, someone he thinks is too broken to fight back. Suddenly, the car screeched to a halt. A heavy delivery truck had swerved across the icy road, blocking their path. Julian's driver cursed, reaching for something under the dash. Stay down, Julian commanded. Lena looked through the front windshield. A figure stepped out of the truck, silhouetted by the high beams. It was Marcus's head of security. The silence inside the SUV was deafening, broken only by the low thrum of the engine. Outside, the head of security, a man named Miller, who had sat at Elena's kitchen table drinking coffee just last week, stepped into the light. He wasn't wearing his usual professional smile. He looked like a man finishing a job. Julian, he's seen us, Alina whispered, her hand instinctively shielding her stomach. Marcus won't just let me walk away with his secrets. He's terrified of what I know. Julian's expression didn't flicker. Then let's give him something new to fear. He leaned forward, tapping the partition. Elias, don't engage. Just show him the invitation. The driver lowered the front window just an inch and held out a thick, cream-colored envelope. Miller approached warily, his hand hovering near his jacket hip. He snatched the envelope, tore it open, and his face went ashen under the streetlights. He looked at the car, then back at the letter, and stepped aside without a word, signaling the truck to clear the path. As they moved past, Alina turned to Julian. What was in that? How did you make a man like Miller back down? Information, Julian said, his eyes returning to his tablet. Marcus isn't the only one who keeps files, but we don't have time for a victory lap. We have exactly 3 hours before Marcus realizes his digital firewall has been breached. By who? By you, Julian said, handing her a sleek, modified laptop. You were the one who coded his initial security protocols before you gave up your career to be Mrs. Marcus Thorne. You left a ghost protocol in the architecture. I need you to trigger it. Alina looked at the device. Her fingers, still stiff from the cold, hovered over the keys. For years, she had suppressed this part of herself, the brilliant strategist, the coder, the woman who could see patterns in chaos. Marcus had told her she was emotional and unfit for the pressures of the industry. He had gaslit her into believing her brain had turned to mush the moment she conceived. I can't, she breathed. My head is spinning. I'm exhausted, Julian. That's what he counts on, Julian replied, his voice dropping to a low, steadying frequency. He counts on your exhaustion to be his armor. But look at that screen, Alina. Look at the transaction logs from 20 minutes ago. Alina squinted at the scrolling text. Her eyes widened. Marcus wasn't just hiding money. He was moving funds into a trust for someone named S. Miller, his security chief's daughter. Alina asked. No, Julian said, his voice grim. The mistress he's been hiding in the city, the one he's replacing you with tomorrow at the Christmas gala. The pain was a sharp, cold needle in her heart, but beneath it, a spark of heat ignited. The interruption of her life wasn't a tragedy, it was a heist. Give me the laptop, Alina said, her voice dropping an octave. I'm not just going to trigger the protocol. I'm going to rewrite it. The SUV pulled into a secluded high-tech garage beneath a nondescript glass building. Alina didn't wait for Julian to open her door. She stepped out. the laptop clutched to her chest like a shield. The transition from the freezing street to this sterile, hummed environment mirrored the shift happening inside her. The fear was still there, a dull throb in her temples, but the clarity was sharper. "You have a direct line to his private server here," Elena asked, walking toward a sleek workstation. "The best money can buy." Julian replied, pulling out a chair for her. "But Marcus is paranoid. He's already started the crisis management phase. He's leaked a story to the press that you left him in a mental health crisis. By morning, you'll be the unstable wife who ran away on Christmas Eve." Elena paused, her fingers hovering over the glowing keys. "He's making me a ghost before I can even speak." "That's his specialty," Julian said. "He controls the narrative. If you don't change the story now, you'll be fighting from a padded cell for the next 10 years. Elena took a deep breath and began to type. The code flowed from her mind to the screen with a fluid grace she thought she had lost. She navigated through the layers of Marcus's encryption, bypassing the firewalls she had helped him design. It was a digital map of their marriage, cold, calculated, and filled with traps. "I'm in," she whispered. The screen flickered. A folder labeled Project Bethlehem sat at the center of the desktop. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. She clicked it, expecting financial records. Instead, she found a series of high-resolution photos and audio files. "Wait," she said, her voice small. "This isn't just business. Julian, look at this." The photos showed Marcus in a series of clandestine meetings, but not with a mistress. He was meeting with the city's chief of police and a high-ranking judge. In every photo, money changed hands. But it was the audio file that made Elena's blood run cold. She pressed play. "She's a liability now." Marcus's voice echoed through the room, clear and chilling. "The pregnancy makes it messy, but the payoff is worth it. Once she's out of the picture, the development deal goes through. Just make sure the accident on the mountain road looks like a weather-related tragedy." Elena's hand flew to her mouth. He wasn't just kicking her out. Kay was erasing her. "He was going to kill me," she breathed, the realization shattering the last of her illusions. "He is going to kill you," Julian corrected, checking his watch. "The mountain road is the only way to your mother's house. He expected you to drive there tonight." Suddenly, the lights in the garage flickered and died. Red emergency strobes began to pulse, and a mechanical voice announced a security breach. "He found us," Julian said, his hand moving to his inner coat pocket. "He's used the city's grid to track the server ping." Outside, the sound of heavy tires screeching on concrete erupted. The rhythmic pulse of the red emergency lights turned the garage into a strobe-lit nightmare. Elena's shadow stretched and contracted against the concrete walls like a frantic specter. "Julian, we have to go," she cried, but Julian remained motionless, his eyes fixed on the entrance. "If we run, we confirm we're the prey," Julian said, his voice dropping into a lethal, quiet register. "Sit back down, Elena. Finish the upload. You don't understand. He's here." "No," Julian countered, pointing at the security monitors. "He's not here. He sent the professionals, but they don't know you've already bypassed the mainframe. If you stop now, the audio file dies with us." Elena looked from the dark maw of the garage entrance back to the laptop screen. A progress bar crawled toward 82%. Her hands were shaking so violently she had to grip the edge of the desk. She wasn't just a coder anymore. She was a witness to her own planned execution. The sound of a heavy door being kicked open echoed through the facility. Footsteps, synchronized and heavy, marched toward their position. 60 seconds, Julian whispered, stepping in front of her, his body a human shield. Elena forced her mind to detach. She ignored the sirens, the strobes, and the impending threat. She focused on the code. She saw a secondary encryption layer. Marcus had hidden a dead man's switch that would wipe the server if an unauthorized download was detected. "He's going to wipe it," she gasped. "The moment it hits 100%, he'll trigger a thermal delete. Then change the destination," Julian commanded. To where? The one place he can't touch, Julian said. The public live stream of the Christmas gala. Every investor, every journalist, every socialite in the city is watching that feed right now. Elena's fingers flew. She rerouted the data packets, weaving the incriminating audio into the gala's media presentation loop. It was a digital kamikaze mission. 90%, she muttered. The first of the men in tactical gear rounded the corner, their laser sights cutting through the red haze. A red dot settled on Julian's chest. "Drop the device," a voice boomed. Julian didn't move. "You're late," he said, coolly. "Elena. Now." "Oh." She slammed the enter key just as a gloved hand reached for the laptop. The screen turned bright white, and a single word appeared in the center, "transmitted." The lead operative grabbed the laptop, but Julian laughed a dry, rasping sound. "You can take the hardware, boys. I suggest you check your phones. The show has already started." The men paused. Simultaneously, their tactical radios crackled with static, replaced by a sudden, jarring sound, Marcus's voice, amplified and echoing, beginning to play the recording of the accident plan. The lead operative looked at Elena, his mask hiding his expression, but his hesitation was loud. He lowered his weapon. "The contract just changed," Julian noted. "You aren't protecting a CEO anymore. You're protecting a corpse." The tactical team stood frozen as Marcus's recorded voice, cold, calculating, and murderous, bounced off the concrete walls of the garage. The lead operative checked his handheld device, his eyes darting between the data stream and Elena. The silence that followed was heavy with the realization that the man paying their checks had just become the most hated man in the state. "The feed is live," Julian said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "It's not just on the gala screens. It's on every news affiliate from here to the coast. You can take us in, but you'll be doing it in front of 10 million witnesses." The lead operative signaled his men. They didn't fire. They didn't move forward. With a disciplined mechanical precision, they backed away into the shadows of the garage, disappearing as quickly as they had arrived. They were professionals. They knew when a client had moved from an asset to a liability. Elena slumped against the workstation, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Is it over?" "The pursuit is over," Julian said, reaching out to steady her. "But the war has just entered the final phase. Marcus is currently at the Grand Ballroom. He hasn't realized yet that the world knows he's a murderer." "I want to see him," Elena said. Her voice was no longer trembling. A cold, hard resolve had taken root in her chest. The woman who had been kicked into the snow was gone. "Lena, you're exhausted. You need a doctor," Julian cautioned. "I need him to look me in the eye when his empire falls," she countered. She looked down at her stained maternity sweater and her salt-crusted boots. "But I'm not going like this." 2 hours later, the SUV pulled up to the curb of the Grandview Hotel. The red carpet was a chaotic swarm of reporters and flashing lights inside. The elite of the city were gathered for the charity auction, but the atmosphere was toxic. The Project Bethlehem files were scrolling on the giant monitors behind the podium. Alternating with the audio of Marcus's betrayal, Elena stepped out of the car. Julian had provided a coat of midnight silk that draped over her silhouette, hiding the vulnerability of her pregnancy while accentuating her stature. She walked with a slow, deliberate grace, Julian a half-step behind her like a silent sentinel. The lobby fell silent as she entered. People parted like the Red Sea. They didn't see a victim. They saw a ghost returning to haunt the man who had tried to bury her. She reached the double doors of the ballroom. Through the glass, she could see Marcus standing on stage, his face a mask of pale fury as he shouted at a technician trying to get the screens turned off. He looked small. He looked desperate. "Ready?" Julian whispered. Elena placed a hand on the heavy brass handle. "I've been ready since the door clicked shut on me tonight." She pushed the doors open. The sound of the gala, the frantic whispers, the clinking glass stopped instantly. Marcus turned, his eyes bulging as they landed on his wife. "Alina," he stammered into the live microphone. You aren't supposed to be here." "I know," Alina said, her voice carrying through the silent room with effortless power. "I was supposed to be dead on a mountain road." Marcus staggered back against the mahogany podium, the feedback from the microphone letting out a sharp, piercing whine that mirrored the collective gasp of the audience. The high society guests, dressed in velvet and diamonds, looked back and forth between the giant, screens still displaying the evidence of his corruption, and the woman standing at the entrance. "Alina, darling, you're confused," Marcus managed, his voice cracking as he tried to reclaim his practiced CEO persona. "The stress of the pregnancy. The doctor said you might have an episode. Someone call an ambulance. My wife is having a breakdown." Alina didn't flinch. She walked down the center aisle, the clicking of her heels the only sound in the cavernous room. Every eye followed her. She looked at the men and women who had ignored her for years, the ones who had whispered that she was just a lucky assistant who had married up. "The only breakdown happening tonight, Marcus, is the one you built yourself," Alina said, stopping at the foot of the stage. "You didn't just throw me out. You tried to liquidate me like a bad investment. That's enough." Marcus hissed, leaning over the podium, his face contorting into the mask of the monster she had seen in the hallway. "You have no proof of anything. That audio is a deepfake, a desperate move by a woman losing her grip." "Is the deed to the Cayman Holding Company a deepfake too?" Alina asked, holding up a sleek tablet Julian had handed her. "Or the offshore transfers to the judge who was supposed to handle our custody hearing?" "I didn't just find the audio, Marcus. I found the ledger." A murmur of horror rippled through the crowd. Two board members of Marcus's firm stood up, their faces grim. They weren't looking at Marcus with pity. They were looking at him with the calculated coldness of a business that was about to cut its losses. "Security?" Marcus screamed, his eyes darting frantically. "Get her out of here." But the security team, the men who usually jumped at his every command, remained motionless at the perimeter of the room. Miller, the head of security who had let the SUV pass earlier that night, slowly shook his head. He looked at the floor, refusing to meet Marcus's gaze. "They aren't coming for me, Marcus," Alina said, her voice dropping to a chillingly calm level. "They work for the Thorn Corporation. And as of 3 minutes ago, the board has initiated an emergency vote of no confidence based on the data I leaked. You aren't the CEO anymore. You read just a man in an expensive suit standing on a stage that doesn't belong to him." Marcus lunged forward, reaching for her as if he could physically choke the truth back into her throat. But Julian stepped out from the shadows, his presence a wall of iron between them. "Don't," Julian warned. At that moment, the heavy doors at the back of the hall swung open again. This time, it wasn't a guest. It was the blue uniforms of the state police. The arrival of the police didn't bring a chaotic climax. It brought a cold, clinical silence. Marcus froze, his hand outstretched, caught in a gesture of aggression that was now being recorded by dozens of smartphone cameras. The flashing blue lights from the foyer spilled into the ballroom, reflecting off the crystal chandeliers like a fractured winter sky. "Marcus Thorn." The lead officer called out, weaving through the silent tables. "We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, and felony embezzlement." Marcus looked around the room, his eyes wild, searching for a friendly face. He found only the stony glares of his peers and the raised cameras of the press. His reputation, the only thing he had ever truly loved, had disintegrated in a single hour. As the officers reached the stage, he didn't fight. He collapsed into himself, the image of the powerful titan replaced by a hollow shell of a man. As they led him away in handcuffs, he passed Alina. He stopped, his face twisted in a pathetic mixture of rage and pleading. "Alina, wait. The baby. We can fix this. Think of our child." Lena stood tall, her hand resting protectively over her stomach. She felt the kick of the life within her, a reminder of why she had fought. My child will never know your name, Marcus. And as for fixing things, you can't fix a heart you tried to stop. She didn't watch them lead him out. She turned her back as the heavy doors closed behind him for the last time. Julian stepped up beside her, offering a steady arm. The board wants to talk to you. They know you the one who built the system they were using to save the company. They're offering a consultancy, maybe more. Alina looked at the room, the wealth, the posturing, the coldness of the world Marcus had worshipped. She looked at the snow still clinging to the windows, a reminder of the woman who had almost frozen on a curb. Not tonight, Alina said, her voice clear and resonant. Tonight, I'm going home. My real home. And where is that? Julian asked with a faint, respectful smile. Wherever I choose to be, she replied. Cruelty is loud, Julian, but self-respect is quiet. I think I'm ready for some silence. She walked out of the Grandview Hotel, stepping into the crisp Christmas morning air. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the snow in shades of gold and pink. She was alone, but for the first time in years, she wasn't lonely. She had lost a mansion, a husband, and a false life, but she had gained herself. Justice hadn't just been served, it had been engineered. As she hailed a cab, she didn't look back at the lights of the gala. She looked forward, into the light of a new year. I choose me, she whispered to the morning. I choose us.